Hello and good morning, everyone. I'm Prachi Pasalkar, Program Manager at Pune Knowledge Cluster. And I welcome all of you to this 8th talk of India Science and Technology at the rate 75 lecture series, which Pune Knowledge Cluster and Indian Academy of Sciences jointly organize. So today we have with us very eminent personality. We have with us Professor Arun Grover for the talk. And I would request Professor Ajit Kembhavi, who is the principal investigator of Pune Knowledge Cluster and a renowned astrophysicist of the country, also ex-director of Ayuka, to kindly introduce Professor Grover. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Prachi. So I'm very happy to introduce my friend and very eminent condensed matter physicist, Professor Arun Kumar Grover, who's our speaker today. In the coming August, it will be exactly 50 years since we first met, when we are starting our PhDs in TIFR as research scholars. We are called visiting members in those days, and we have remained ever close friends ever since. So Professor Grover finished his PhD in TIFR, and then he was a postdoc at Imperial College in London. And he has always been working on experimental condensed matter physics. So I remember that some of the projects that he used to be very interested in when he was in London was on the physics of small particles. And later, he also worked on high temperature superconductivity. Now, for all his work, he has been awarded the Homi Bhabha Science and Technology Award by BRC in 1995. So after having spent a lot of time in TIFR, he was chosen as the 12th Vice Chancellor of Punjab University in Chandigarh. And there he had the rare distinction of being a Vice Chancellor for 2 terms there. So which is quite unusual. And he brought about many reforms in that university. One of the things he did at Chandigarh was that Chandigarh and Mohali, was that he recognized that there were so many different institutions there, academic and R&D labs. And so he thought that it would be wonderful to have a cluster. And then he set up a cluster. And I remember he got 2 buses, which would take people which would go around collecting people for common events. And that turned out to be a great success. I believe it used to be called CRIXC. Then I was very impressed with that idea. And I mentioned it to Professor Vijayaraghavan and to my friend, Professor Shashidhara from IISER Pune. And we decided to set up a proposal to have a cluster like that in Pune. And then we did that. But by the time the cluster was actually approved, it had taken on a much bigger form, where it was decided to have these clusters to bring together academics, R&D institutions, as well as the industry. And so now there are 5 such clusters, and probably a 6th one will be there soon. And it has been quite a success story, for which we have to thank Professor Grover. So he will be today talking to us about 2 physicists who have been his favorites. One is Meghnad Saha and the other is Shanti Bhatnagar. I'm sure you have heard about them before. They're very famous people. And Professor Grover will tell us about the work, not only within the science, but also the big things that they did for the country, which form an enduring legacy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And over to you, Professor Grover.
So good morning, everyone. I am indeed delighted to have this opportunity to give a talk in the series India Science and Technology at 75 at the forum of Pune Knowledge Cluster in association with the Indian Academy of Sciences. My contemporary, Professor Dilip Kanere, a condensed matter physicist like me, gave the 7th talk in this series, and I'm indeed in a very good company. So the narrative of today's talk is titled as Meghnad Saha and Shanti Bhatnagar, Pioneers of Research and Development in India. And this title is motivated by the popular TV serial, Rocket Boys, which describes the story of 2 extraordinary men, Bhabha and Sarabhai. And the story is supposed to be set around 3 crucial decades in the history of India. and the producers of this serial say that this describes how the nation is moving towards being a strong, brave, and independent nation by virtue of the efforts of Sarabhai and Bhabha. So it's my belief that there is a prelude to this serial. And my today's narrative is actually, describes that prelude to the Rocket Boys. So I am going to tell you how Saha and Bhatnagar seized up the opportunities immediately before and after the start of the Second World War to enable Indian scientists to conceive plans for scientific research and development of India. And so, Bhabha and Sarabhai are a part of that larger process which got set in motion because of Saha and Bhatnagar. Okay, so Saha was a classmate, was a contemporary of Subhash Bose. They both studied together in the Presidency College. Saha was 3 years senior to Bose, but they had remained in contact ever since their college days. So now Bose became the president of the Indian National Congress in 1938, and Saha maneuvered to have a planning committee on behalf of the Indian National Congress, and he had Jawaharlal Nehru appointed as a chairman of that committee via his equation with Subhash Bose. So Bhatnagar was a professor like Saha. Saha was at Allahabad, and Bhatnagar was at University of Punjab at Lahore. And by virtue of great credentials of Bhatnagar, Bhatnagar was chosen to head the newly created Board of Scientific and Industrial Research in 1939. And he was moved out to Calcutta, and he was provided a small sum of money. And with that money, Bhatnagar reached out to his fellow teachers in the universities. And this, of course, included at that time C.V. Raman, Saha, Bose, and several others. And that is what I shall describe to you. So by 1942, CSR, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, was in place. And 1943, Saha masterminded getting together of all the Indian scientists in Calcutta for a meeting. And in that meeting, they prepared a framework for research and development for post-Second World War India. Now, once that the framework was in place, Saha via Bhatnagar invited a British member of parliament, namely Nobel Laureate A.V. Hill, who was at that time also the secretary to the Royal Society. He got A.V. Hill to visit India for a period of 4 months and talk to the Indian scientists. So Hill was much impressed with whatever was described to him. So, and he submitted a report titled Scientific Research in India. And that he made detailed recommendation as to what all should be done. So that was the agenda which could be implemented if the government is supporting them. So India becomes independent, and a synergy between the scientists and the political leaders, accelerated the work plan on that agenda. Because by 1946, Nehru had become vice president of the Viceroy's Council. So he was head of, in some sense, the interim government, and that is what got going. So next 50 minutes, I'm going to just elucidate what is the preview which I have just described to you. So, okay. So let's start by having a brief recap on Meghnad Saha. Meghnad Saha was born in a grocer's family. His brothers had not done well in the school. The father had no interest in educating him, but he was very bright. So somebody had sort of took his guardianship, and he passed the middle school as standing first in the Dhaka division. So that got him moved to the high school in Dhaka, and from there he graduated in 1909, and he was first in the East Bengal. So he did his intermediate in Dhaka, and in 1911 he moved to Presidency College, Calcutta. and from where he completed his bachelor's and master's degree. So by 1915, he had completed his master's degree, and his classmate was Satyen Bose. Satyen Bose was first in the master's and Saha was the second, and they did this master's, in a mixture of physics and mathematics. Okay, so it was something like let me call it mathematical physics. At that time. So 1915, all this was over. Now Saha was looking for a job, and he wanted to write some competitive exam, but given Saha's revolutionary past, he was not permitted to write that exam. Fortunately for him, the famous Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University, Ashutosh Mukherjee, was the first Indian to be the Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University from 1908 to 1914. At the end of his first term, his 4 terms as a Vice Chancellor in 1915, he proposed the creation of establishment of a postgraduate college of science in Calcutta, which was to be an affiliated college of Calcutta University. And so that college got going. He generated a lot of money to create professorships in that Calcutta, etc., etc. So by 1916, everything was set to provide a quality science education to the youth of Calcutta. And for that, you needed quality teachers. And he inducted all the toppers of the Calcutta University in the recent past to teach the new postgraduate students of Calcutta University. So in that grand plan of his, he inducted Saha, Satyen Bose, and PC Mahalanobis, DM Bose, several others of their contemporaries as teachers in that science college. And these young teachers were supposed to not only teach more young people, but also register themselves for their research. If they could find it, guides, fine. Otherwise, explore things yourself. So given the creativity of Saha had completed, he had written 9 papers in just a year and a half. 8 of them were single authors. 1 of them was jointly with Bose. And that earned him the DSc degree of Calcutta University in 1990. Thereafter, Ashutosh Mukherjee had got him a traveling fellowship, a kind of a fellowship which could enable him to do postdoctoral work in England and Germany. So he went to England in 1919. After 2 years, he returned, and Ashutosh Mukherjee again generated a professorship for him. It was a Kara professorship in 1921. Saha didn't stay in Calcutta for very long. He accepted a better offer from Allahabad University and moved as professor and head of the physics department at Allahabad University in 1923, and he stayed there till the 1938. Okay, he became FRS in 1927. He went to US thereafter, and so on. So by 1930, he had established the Provincial Academy of Sciences at Allahabad, which went on to become the National Academy of Sciences in India. And 1930 is also the year when C.V. Raman had got Nobel Prize for his discovery of Raman effect in 1928. And Raman, of course, had also become FRS several years earlier than Saha. So fine, he had a visit to US in 1936, and there he went and saw the Tennis Valley Corporation. He saw how dams were being built to control floods and generate hydroelectric power in US. He came back, and in 1937 he advocated the creation of river valley schemes to control floods in Bihar and Bengal. So 37 it was like this. By 38 he had proposed the creation of this planning committee to the Subhash Bose, but he himself also returned to Calcutta as a Palit Professor of Physics. Palit Professorship was a professorship which was first offered to J.C. Bose, but then thereafter he didn't accept it. But then Raman was a Palit Professor till 1933. Thereafter D.M. Bose was a Palit Professor. So Saha returned in 1938 to Calcutta as a Palit Professor. Bhatnagar had reached in Calcutta in 1940. That a little bit I've already told you. So, and then that grand plan started. So India becomes independent. So Saha, given the involvement of Saha in all kinds of activities related to education and research. When the first Education Commission was created with Radhakrishnan as chairman, Radhakrishnan was 4 years elder than Saha, but Saha was indeed made an important member of the Radhakrishnan Committee. 49, he created this Institute of Nuclear Physics, which is known as the Science Institute of Nuclear Physics. Today, in 1950, when the general elections are held, like A.V. Hill, he also contested for the Lok Sabha. He became an independent member of the Lok Sabha at 52. Nehru made him a member of the Planning Commission as well. But Saha didn't live very long. He was gone by 1956. He unfortunately passed away. So this is Bhatnagar for you with Kalam and Nehru, and that is what I call the synergy between scientists and the political leaders. So Bhatnagar is born roughly the same time as Saha. Saha was born 6th of October 93, and Bhatnagar is born 21st February 1894. So Bhatnagar lost his father when he was just 8 months old, and long story, but eventually he came under the care of a friend of his father, who was the principal of Dayal Singh High School, which was created by Dayal Singh Majitia, the same Dayal Singh Majitia who had created, who has established Tribune, parallel to the creation of newspapers by Lokmanya Tilak in Pune. So he completed his matriculation in 1911 from this school, and as a high school student, immediately after matriculation, he had written a paper, Fermentation of Pomegranate Juice, which was published in a science magazine called Roshni. So as a college student, he was an innovator. He provided import substitution for something which was missing in the printing presses, and for that he was given a reward for 150 rupees. He also wrote 2 science publications, and one of that publication related to the carbon needed for electrodes in the batteries. Okay, these were all war years, and these things were in short supply in India. In 1919, he got a degree in chemistry. He had earlier taken a degree in physics, which again has a long story. But anyway, after the completion of his master's, Ruchiram Sani, who was a trustee of the Dayal Singh Majitia Trust, he got him a traveling fellowship to go abroad. And he wanted to go to USA, but he stopped at London, and he registered for a doctoral study under a British professor at University of College London, who was a physical chemist, Professor Donnan. So Bhatnagar completed his PhD like Saha in just 2 years. He also wrote 8 single author papers in that 2 years, and University of London awarded him the DSc degree, like Saha had got the DSc degree in Calcutta by bypassing the PhD degree. So he traveled with Meghnad Saha to meet Nobel Laureate Nunst in Berlin in 1920. On his return to India in 1921, Malviya invited him to be a research professor in chemistry at BHE on the lines of C.V. Raman being a research professor at University of Calcutta. So he stayed at BHU for 3 years, but then he was invited or selected to be the first director of University Chemical Laboratories, which were newly created in Lahore. So he arrived in Lahore in 1925 and remains there till the British pull him out to head the Board of Scientific and Industrial Research. 1st of April 1940, he reaches Calcutta. By 42, the CSIR had been created with Bhatnagar as the director of the CSIR. And now he was actively working with Saha, okay, to prepare plans for research and development of India in the post-war period. Okay, so as the time goes by, he was a member of the Sargent Committee. He was also the member of the Sarkar Committee, which gave a plan for creation of IITs. He was the first Secretary of Higher Education and the chairman of UGC till he passed away on 1st of January 1955. So, they lived roughly the same length of time. One was born a few months earlier, so another one went a few months later, but we lost both of them by 1955. Okay, so this is just to convince you that whatever I have told you it as an evidence. So these are the 8 papers, single author papers published by Bhatnagar at Lahore, and this is his thesis. Now, in the same way, these are the 9 papers written by Meghnad Saha between 1918 and 1990. So, you know, they have this 2 stalwarts, very creative, different talents working together. So now again, this is a photograph taken in 1921 when Acharya Praful Chandra Ray, who was knighted in 1919, when he traveled to London. And when he goes to London, he meets all the Indian PhD students and the postdocs who are there. This is a photograph taken at that time. I found this photograph in this INSA publication which came up in 2019 as INSA celebrated 125th birth year of Meghnad Saha. So this is PC Ray for you. This is Bhatnagar. This is Meghnad Saha. This is J.N. Mukherjee, Bhatnagar, and J.C. Ghosh. You know, these were the 3 students who enrolled for doing PhD under Professor Donnan. All 3 were students of Professor Donnan, and you can see Professor Donnan as here is Professor Donnan for you. So, you know, so you can see many other famous names in this photograph. This photograph also has Alfred Fowler, and J.N. Mukherjee was a student registered. Snehamoy Datta was a student who was registered as a PhD student of Fowler, and Snehamoy Datta was a classmate of Saha when they did MSc together at Calcutta University. So you see, purpose of showing this photograph is how these scientists who sort of prepared the agenda for development of India, you know, how they had this enthusiasm to develop India as they would grow up, and they knew each other, and they planned for many, many decades together, okay, by the time India becomes independent. So this is again a collection of 10 contemporaries of Meghnad Saha and Satyan Bose. All of them are born within few months of each other. They were born in 1893, 1894, you can see. Okay. And it is, you know, Saha, Bose, J.C. Ghosh, who succeeded Raman as a director of IISc. This is J.N. Mukherjee, who gave the thought of having IARI as a university. He turned from a chemical physicist to a soil physicist later on. S.K. Banerjee did PhD with Raman. He was the first Indian to be the director of Indian Meteorological Department. This is Mahalanobis, again is a contemporary. S.K. Mitra, the radio physics man of India. B.B. Ray, the X-ray. It's again a student of Raman, X-ray man of India. Snehamoy Datta was, of course, did his PhD with Fowler and was served as a registrar of Calcutta University later on. Then this is famous N.R. Sen mathematician whose student was H.R.B., etc. So, what was the state of India when College of Science, Postgraduate College of Science was created by Ashutosh Mukherjee in Calcutta? So this is a picture which is there in Calcutta. Somebody shared it with me, namely Dr. Salunke, and it tells you, you know, where all the institutions were, where the colleges got created, how the medical colleges were there in Calcutta, Mumbai, Chennai, and so on, and where the engineering colleges were. So this is a kind of the state of the education scene, a state of institution in India before the creation of Postgraduate College of Science in Calcutta. So we had engineering colleges, we had medical colleges, but we didn't have quality science education in Calcutta, and that gap was fulfilled first by Ashutosh Mukherjee and later by creation of Banaras Hindu University by Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya. Of course, Indian Institute of Science had been created in 1909, but not much research was on in the initial phase. In fact, it took many years before the Indian Institute could get departments in technology and physics came much later, but of course there was a chemistry department much later. Agricultural research is the only thing that the British had supported. So IARI, its Imperial Agricultural Research Institute, was created in Bihar. It had moved to Delhi later on. Similarly, an agricultural research college was created at Lalpur and also the one at Coimbatore. So, all right. So, but just before the arrival of the Second World War, India had elections in several states which were a part of the British India. The East India Company or the British India had, there are princely states, these are the princely states, but the large part of India was under the British rule. So on the states which are under the British rule, for that provincial elections were held on the party line. And Nehru was the campaign manager for on behalf of Indian National Congress when the elections held. So Congress party was the largest, emerged as the largest party in Bengal, but the Congress did not form the government in Punjab, same in Bengal. Same way, the Congress could not form a government in Punjab either. So now both these places, which eventually get divided, and you can see seeds of this were there right before the beginning. So it is 1937, immediately after these elections. So is the Subhash Bose who becomes the president of the Indian National Congress, and then Saha gets into the act. So he says, this is an extract from a lecture delivered by Dr. G. Venkatraman, same G. Venkatraman who wrote the biography of C.V. Raman and Bhabha, and this is a lecture he delivered in 1984. Transcript of this lecture was published in a book during the centenary year of Bhabha, and in that book, it is now written there. Saha and Nehru knew each other from Allahabad days, okay? And so in 1938, Subhash Bose becomes the Congress president, and Saha persuades Bose to create this planning committee. He persuades Vishweshwara Raya, who was the first choice to head this committee, to step down, and Nehru gets appointed as the chairman of the planning committee. And Nehru had strong belief on the Soviet model of development, the same thoughts that Saha shared. So Saha and Nehru, had the same, you can say, the ideology as to how to develop India. So they knew each other very well for a period of over 20, 30 years. They fell apart only when Saha becomes an independent member of parliament, and he finds that Nehru was not implementing the Soviet model of development. Truly, he was deviating from it, and that is what the two of them fell apart. And by that time, Bhabha had stepped in. They had stepped in. So Nehru started to rely on Bhabha more than on Saha. So this is again a photograph taken in 1938, and this is Bose is having a meeting with all the industries ministers of different provincial states. The only non-minister in this photograph is Meghnad Saha. This photograph also I found it in this 2019 book on Saha published by the INSA. So now this is Saha with J.C. Bose. J.C. Bose was the first Indian teachers to be employed to teach science students in the Presidency College. The second one was Acharya Praful Chandra Ray. I have shown you the photograph of Saha with Ray, and this is now the Saha with J.C. Bose, and plus all the contemporaries of Saha. This is 1937. By that time, all these people are above the age of 40. Okay. So now Saha at Allahabad had groomed, he had great contemporaries. So he had contact with his contemporaries, he has contact with the students of his contemporaries, but he himself also produced great students at Allahabad. Kichlu was his, P.K. Kichlu was his student. He is the one who started the physics department at Lahore. Kothari was his student. Toshniwal of Toshniwal Industries was his student. Famous theorist R.C. Majumdar, who worked at TIFR for a while, and later on was an eminent professor in Delhi University, along with Kothari. He was also a student of Saha. Then B.D. Nag Chaudhary, one of his last students at at Allahabad, whom he sent to Berkeley to bring a cyclotron from there, and he was later on also succeeded him at Saha Institute of Nuclear Physics, and later on did many things in Delhi. He was scientific advisor to the Defense Ministry after Kothari. Kothari was the first this thing. Chaudhary was also the Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University in the later days. So this is how Saha nurtured all his students. He used to invite eminent professors from England to visit India because the British government had set aside some money to invite professors in the cold months. Whenever there were winter vacation in England and everything is frozen, eminent British professors were encouraged to tour India, and Saha kept a tap on them, and he will have all of them visit Allahabad University. This is Saha with Summerfield when he visited India. Summerfield had toured all along India. He had also gone to Calcutta. He had given quantum mechanics lectures at the invitation of C.V. Raman, whose notes were prepared by K.S. Krishnan. This is once again 1932. This is Saha with mathematician A.C. Banerjee, who served as a VC of Allahabad University later, and is Kothari also for you. This is another photograph when Arthur Eddington visited Allahabad in 1934. Again, this is Saha with Eddington, and it has all these. There is a Chaudhary in the photograph. There is Majumdar in the photograph. Kichku, Kushniwal. All these people, they will, wherever they may be working, they will come to Allahabad when an eminent scientist is visiting Allahabad at the invitation of Saha. So you can see the great organizational ability of Saha to have people work for a common cause. So what is the state of institutions in India just before the war? So we, of course, has Calcutta as a center for science. There is Indian Association of Cultivation of Science in Calcutta. The Indian Statistical Institution has been, ISI had been created by Mahalanobis, and Bose after retirement had created a Bose Research Institute. Bombay and Madras University also had science activity because they had institutes of science in Bombay University. So University of Punjab also had started the honor schools. In their own way, they had created university departments as an intercollegiate activity at Lahore. Of course, Allahabad had Saha, A.C. Banerjee, and Arther. So Allahabad was a competitor to Calcutta. Banaras also, Malviya had done this from 1916 onwards. Dhaka had been created as a university by further bifurcating Calcutta University in 1920s. There IISCs there, Institute of Sciences at Nagpur, also in Bombay, IARA, I have already told you. And then there are good technical colleges at Roorkee, Pune, Gindi, Shibpur, Bombay, Lahore, and there are medical colleges. So this is the kind of institutions we had in India, which went on to play a great role as India becomes independent. So brief chronology. So Raman, as I told you, is Nobel Prize in 1930. Saha creates this academy. Raman and J.C. Ghosh, they seek the creation of an advisory board for scientific research, scientific and industrial research in India, which does not happen. The nature of editor also supports them, but the viceroy would have nothing to do with it. And so nothing happens until the Second World War arrives. Of course, the Tata Iron and Steel Company was there in Jamshedpur. So the Tata has created a control and research laboratory at Jamshedpur, which becomes a precursor of creating a national metallurgical lab in a decade to come. So Second World War arrives. Now the British factories are being bombed, research centers are being bombed, and then the Ramaswamy Mutliar, a commerce member in the Viceroy's Council, kind of a Minister for Commerce in the Viceroy's Council, he seeks the creation of board for scientific and industrial research. He picks up Bhatnagar as to head this BSIR, and he is moved to Calcutta. So Bhatnagar reaches Calcutta in 1940, and Bhatnagar invites Raman, Saha, Mitra, Ghosh, etc. All these people whom he had known as young student in London. He invites all of them. They had 5 lakh rupees, and they had to spend 5 lakh rupees. This amongst themselves, but they must work for the military research. This is what they had to do. In 1941, Bhatnagar had proposed the creation of National Chemical Laboratories in Pune because Tata wanted a chemical labs in Pune, and they had given set aside a small sum for it. Bhatnagar asked for creation of an NPL in Delhi. So essentially bifurcate the National Test House into two national labs, and all this was in 1941. By 42, CSIR came into being. Okay. And as I told you, Meghnad Saha in 43, with the help of J.C. Ghosh, he convened a meeting in which all these people are there. Saha, Agarkar, Sochi, Bhatnagar, Mitra, Mukherjee, Mahalanobis, DM Bose, H.K. Guha, Subramanian. You can see all these guys. Everyone is there. There's a food technologist is there, this chemist is there, the mathematician is there. Bose, of course, has debut of J.C. Bose. So all these people are there, and they prepare a framework for what should be done as the India, in the post-war India. Nobody knew whether India would get independent, in what form we will have independent in 43, but this is what it is. But they needed an endorsement of this plan from somebody that the British should trust. So Saha uses Bhatnagar to get A.V. Hill to India, and A.V. Hill arrives in November 43 to spend 4 months in India. So these are, as I told you, this is a list of all the key scientists in India and where all they were there. So you can have a look at it. Okay, B.P. Paul, the agricultural DG of IARI, who is called the Homi Bhabha of agricultural sciences in India, he is also there. All these people were there, who Saha had roped in to make plans. So what did these scientists discuss? They discussed how should wartime infrastructure and science and technology be assimilated for peacetime civil organization. What should be overall organization model for science and technology, and how India should benefit from post-colonial or kind of a Commonwealth structure. So this is what they had said. They had said, we should have a national research council in India that should have 4 parts. 4 boards of research: scientific research, agricultural research, medical and public health research, engineering research. So you can see everything is there. Even our science and technology innovation policy 2020 still talks of unfinished agenda, which was created as early as 1943. How should an NRC be created? The present government has still not managed to create it, but this is there. Then the government filed as to how to go about doing it. So this is Bhatnagar, in September of 1943. And what does Bhatnagar say? First concern of government after the war should be how to find employment for demobilized defense forces. Okay. How to collect how much raw materials we have, the processes developed during the war, how they have to be used in the peacetime for development of industries, how to increase the food production via fertilizers. The fertilizer industry has to be created. Fuel and power are necessary for the pace of industrialization. We need shipbuilding, automobile, transport industries. Should India have chemical industries? All this, industries without business model cannot be created. So you need banking organization. You have to have how to finance new and essential industries, protection of tariffs. So everything that is needed for having an industrialized society or a developed country which relies on both agriculture and industry, all this was discussed, talked, and frozen in the form of some reports which were published in the journal, Saha's journal, Science and Culture. It was all there. So when A.V. Hill was there, Bhabha was in Bangalore. He sought advice of A.V. Hill how to go about creating Fundamental Research Institute in Physics. Initially, it was Fundamental Research Institute in Physics. Okay, later on it expands. So Hill advised Bhabha to include also biological sciences, which Bhabha does it only much later. Hill himself was a mathematician who had turned into physiology, and in a matter of few years that so spectacular a work that he had got Nobel Prize in physiology. So he was a mathematician who got a Nobel Prize in physiology by virtue of having shifted and used his talent somewhere else. So A.V. Hill okay, had also recommended the creation of National Research Council, and it should bring about everything under one umbrella. So Hill report also contains a proposal to create Department of Planning Research. Okay, so Department of Planning Research is indeed created with Arthur Dalal, who was a civil servant, who had resigned from civil service, joined the Tata House, then resigns back from the Tata House and is inducted as a member of, to head the Department of Planning and Research. Because Arther is also one of the 8 authors of the Bombay Plan. So you can see, lots of things are happening simultaneously. There is a Hill report, there is a Bombay Plan, there are common people, and the common people are now getting together. So Bhatnagar as a scientist is already there, a part of the government. Now this Arther Dalal as a representative of the industry also becomes a part of the government, and they have to get moving together. So, and that moving together happens only when the interim government gets formed with Nehru as the head of that interim government. So this AV Hill report, you can, it had 24 sections. Okay, it calls for research training for young Indians after the war. It asks for creating a liaison office in London. There should also be a liaison office in US. There should be a medical education must be given have backing of research. There should be medical research in India. There should be an all India medical center. Statistics and population. So that is all India gets. Indian Population Studies Institute after the independence. There is agriculture should be strengthened. There should be surveys of natural resources, industrial research under the government. So there are everything that you can think of. Okay, there is a section of in it in the AV Hill report. Okay, how the scientific societies in India should be funded, how the pay, what should be the salaries of scientists with the salaries of civil servants. Everything is a part of the AV Hill report, and there are very detailed recommendations. So one of the first recommendations which gets implemented is initiate overseas fellowship scheme for training abroad. So as soon as the World War ends, hundreds of people, hundreds of bright graduates of India, okay, avail of this fellowship scheme to go to England and America. And that gives us the leaders for development in independent India. Varghese was a part of that. Satish Dhawan is a part of that plan. Brahm Prakash is a part of that plan. Khurana was a part of that plan. Gurwat Singh was a part of. You name any of these eminent Indian scientists, several of them are no longer alive. They all went on this Government of India fellowship, which was a recommendation of the AV Hill report. Okay. Then it says create departments of basic medical sciences in medical colleges. Okay, and then create a malaria research institute, create an all India Institute of Medical Sciences kind of a thing, monitor population data, and it says agriculture is India's most important industry. So when it calls for industrial development of India, first it says strengthen agriculture, because agriculture is the one which is providing you money. Without money, how will you have industry? So agriculture must be. Modi ji today talks of doubling the agricultural income, but this call has been there long before any political leader became the Prime Minister of India. That agricultural income has to be enhanced, only then can you have industry development, Atmanirbhar Bharat, etc., etc. So, CSR has to, there should be a synergy between industrial houses and CSR. So these detailed recommendations are there. There should be a instrument, CSIO like of an institute in India. India should have an aviation sector. If you have an aviation sector, you will have to expand the meteorological services. That is how the SK Banerjee, batchmate of Saha, is the first head of the Indian meteorology after the war. How should the war surplus be used? Okay, to kickstart research. Okay. Most important, how to reduce the gap in salaries of the civil servants and researchers so that to attract the best minds for academia and research. So this is a recommendation. of the A.V. Hill. But it takes 60 years to implement this recommendation, and I'll tell you how it eventually gets done. Okay. Then, so everything is there. Have more IACS, have more Tata Memorial Centers. We have started to open these Tata Memorial Centers only in the last 10 years because we didn't have money, and the money has to come only when the agricultural income enhances. So, things have to happen in a sequential manner. Of course, many things can go on in parallel, but lots of things have to happen in a sequential manner. Okay, this is A.V. Hill. He himself says, he says during his visit to India, I threw myself a great deal on Shanti's shoulders while in India. Shanti carried the burden around the country. It was due to his energy, skill, and knowledge, and his great influence with his colleagues, with industry and the government, that it has been possible to get so many things done. So you can see, why Saha is a part of the prelude, and why Bhatnagar is a part of the prelude. But before Bhatnagar, there is a Saha, and Saha and Bhatnagar have been together since the 1919 onwards. But Saha has been together with his contemporaries from 1911 onwards. And A.V. Hill says, the disaster lies ahead if India's industrial development and national welfare are not immediately attended to. Okay. And Bhatnagar himself says there is no doubt that the short stay of a scientist has produced so many lasting effects on Indo-British cooperation than have the goodwill mission of politicians from India. So you see these parallel tracks running, and which tracks succeeds and how the different tracks get joined. So as a part of one of the A.V. Hill's recommendation, Indian scientists go to England, Indian scientists also go to America, and this is, Bhatnagar leading this delegation, and this is Bhatnagar, this is Saha, and there are these people, J.C. Ghosh is there, S.K. Mukherjee is there, J.N. Mukherjee is there, S.K. Mitra is there, and you also have Nazir Ahmed, who goes on to become the first chairman of Pakistan's Atomic Energy Commission. He at one time taught in the Islamia College, Lahore, for 7 years before he had moved to Bombay. So this is Robert Millikan for you, and you can see this is January of 45. The war has not yet ended. So okay, so now let's have a chronology from 44 onwards. So there is a John Sargent Committee is appointed to revamp education in India. So this is parallel to A.V. Hill report, how to revamp education in India. So there is a Sargent Committee. He was an advisor on education in the Viceroy's Council. So Bombay Plan is again 1944. It was released in January 1944 by J.R.D. Tata. The AICTE was created in 45. Bhabha initiates TIFR in 45. Then there is a Nalini Ranjan Sarkar Committee which submits plan for IITs in 1945. India becomes independent. Bhatnagar is appointed Secretary Higher Education. He had already created a committee for atomic research in CSR, but that committee is transformed into Board for Research in Atomic Energy just 11 days after India becomes independent. Groundwork had already been there, some committees there, but Bhatnagar quickly gets converted into a board, and Bhabha is appointed as the chairman of the board. Okay, and then a university education also is appointed with Radhakrishnan as a chairman, Bhatnagar as a member. India becomes independent, republic, UGC gets created once there is a Maulana Azad is there as an education minister, and Maulana Azad appoints Bhatnagar as a chairman of the UGC. UGC Acts, of course, gets passed after Bhatnagar and Saha are no more. But the Second Education Commission, as and when it is created in 64, it is again headed by someone who was a student of Saha. So, okay, what is Sargent committees? We talk of this new education plan, but the Sargent committee's recommendation has everything. Primary education 3 to 6, nursery schools, high schools, secondary schools, then academic schools and the vocational schools, mother tongue to be the medium of instruction. Everything is there in the Sargent Committee's recommendation. English was to be second language, but a compulsory second language. Primary language had to be mother tongue. Education had to be in mother tongue. What should be the student to teacher ratio in school? What should be student to all this is there, all in this. Then there are these Sargent committees views on regulating university education. Okay, so you can see this. UGC should be created. Financial assistance should be given to the universities, given as a block grant, how to empower, encourage private things in the country. Okay, and how to promote cultural contacts and remove international barriers and arrange for exchange of teachers and students from abroad. These are not new things. Okay, this is not Kasturi Rangan's committee has to tell us this thing or some such thing. This has all been there from 1944 itself. Now, how should, the college entrance exams became the school board exam. How should the school boards be reorganized in independent India when the education will expand? All that is a part of Sargent Committee's recommendation. One of the key recommendations was that the 10+2, the intermediate form of education, should be split into two. 1 year should be added to the class 10. So instead of high schools in India, we should have higher secondary schools. Instead of a 2 years of BA education, we should have a 3 years degree course. All this was enshrined in that Sargent Committee's report. Of course, it took us 25 years to implement that. Then again, 25 years to dismantle it. And we are again back to 10+2. And instead of having a 3 years of graduation, now we want to have 4 years of graduation. So this is the process of evolution which has been going on. How NCRT should be created. So all this is there. When NCRT is established in 61 by subsuming 7 earlier national entities to create a higher secondary framework, etc., etc. So we go from whatever is there in the Kothari Commission report to the new policy on education 86 and then NEP 2020. So this is Bombay plan. So Bombay plan, there is Birla, Tata, Lala Shri Ram, Kasurbai, Lalbai, Purushottam Das Thakkar, Arther Shri Dalal, who was an ICS officer who left ICS to join Tata Steel in 1931, goes back to the government in 1944, becomes the member in charge of the planning and development. And Hill gets Bhatnagar work under Shri Dalal, with Bhatnagar wasn't very happy. But anyway, Bhatnagar via Hill manages to get a rank of additional secretary while working as a director CSR. So this is the first step in reducing the gap in the salaries of academics and the civil servants in India. Bhatnagar becoming an additional secretary while serving as a director CSR or while serving as a professor at Lahore. He was on deputation from Lahore at that time. And John Mathai, who was again a part of the Bombay plan, becomes India's first railway minister and followed by the finance minister. So, okay, committee for IITs. Committee for IITs was created by Sir Joginder Singh, who was commerce member of the Viceroy's Council, and he succeeds Nalini Ranjan Sarkar. He was the earlier commerce member of the Viceroy's Council, so he makes him the chairman to give a plan for creating IITs in India. And who are the members of his committee? Bhatnagar, J.C. Ghosh, Nazir Ahmed, John Sargent, Dharamveera, the election commissioner Dharamveera, Sir Sobha Singh, builder of Delhi, and K. Venkatraman, the famous director of UDCT and then later on the DGF's CSR. So they are the people who said, okay, how to create MIT-like institutions in India. So IITs were thought for creating MIT-like institutions in India. So how much will it cost? What should be the fees? What should be the recurring expense, which should come from charging fees from the students? So all this plan is there. What should be the student-teacher ratio? What should be the ratio of postgraduate students to the undergraduate students in the IITs? All this is 1946. So who will implement it? The same man, J.C. Ghosh, who was a part of writing this report. He was a director of IISc at Bangalore at one time. So he is pulled in by Nalini Ranjan Sarkar, who had become a minister in B.C. Roy's government. So this Nalini Ranjan Sarkar pulls in J.C. Ghosh to create IIT Kharagpur. That is how the first IIT comes into being. Synergy between these academicians and politicians, and also these finance people who are to give it money. This gets us the India's first IIT. This also gets us via Rajkumari Amrit for the India's first All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So this is Bhatnagar's views on technical education in 1948. This technological education has not kept pace with the engineering education, shows limited development both in range of subjects covered and the number of institutions provided such courses. If steps are not taken with a sense of urgency to develop training and research facilities on a scale commensurate with the needs of the country, the situation may well go beyond remedy. So indeed, education and training of manpower requires and should be the sheet anchor of every operative plan of national development. It was true in 1948, it is true even today. So these are the 5 national labs that Bhatnagar first created. For them, he could find only 2 directors from within India. One of them was Krishnan, the other was Atmaram. The 3 directors, he gets it from abroad. Very eminent people retired from eminent institutions who had experience. He gets them via Pandit Nehru's intervention as directors of these national labs, so that national labs could be started with a great fervor, with a great leadership in place. So now this is Bhabha's proposal to create TIFR. So the first letter that Bhabha writes to Saklatwala, he says, I hope we shall receive liberal support from Board of Scientific and Industrial Research. And he asked for just 10% of money that Bhatnagar was planning to spend on NPL. And Bhatnagar had no hesitation in giving 10% of the money to Bhabha. So first year he gives TIFR 10,000 rupees, but next year that money is increased to 75,000 rupees, and Bhatnagar himself becomes a member of the Council of Management of TIFR. Now he not only provides all this support to Bhabha, but he also provides all this support to Vikram Sarabhai when he creates its physical research lab. In 1953, when the Atomic Energy Commission is now in place, it was in place in 48 itself, but before the department becomes separate from CSIR, Bhatnagar takes as another important step. He says Tata Institute of Fundamental Research will be the only laboratory of the Atomic Energy Commission. So in view of this decision, Atomic Energy Commission would not set up another laboratory of its own for fundamental research in atomic sciences. And he also gets it hard written in CSR. The CSR will not create an institute parallel to Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. And he only proposes that the TIFR could be a national center. And all this is all Bhatnagar. Then he says the TIFR Mumbai campus is indeed known as the National Center for Nuclear Science and Mathematics. And this is Bhatnagar for you on 1st of January 1954. Okay. Saha was not.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring your attention to.
Yeah, I know it's.
Yeah. We can have 5 more minutes and then question answers.
Okay. So Saha was not invited, but Bhatnagar was there. Anyway, so Mahalanobis and J.C. Ghosh replaced Saha and Bhatnagar. In Delhi, Ghosh also doesn't live very long. So Mahalanobis is the only guy who lives up to 72 and carries India through the first, second, and third 5-year plan. So this is Mahalanobis for you. All of you know Mahalanobis, and he had said statistics must have a clearly defined purpose, one aspect of which is scientific advance, the other human welfare and national development. And these are the scientific advisors to Ministry of Defense. First one was Kothari, second one was Bhagwantam, and they were followed by Nag Chaudhary, Menon, Ramanna, and Arther. You can see all these legacies. So agricultural research is the only thing which the Curzon supported. And as I already told you, the I in IARI was imperial. This becomes Indian in 47. Pruthvi was the first director of IARI. BP Paul becomes the first director who goes on to become Director General of ICAR. And Swaminathan had succeeded him. And IARI was paid into an agricultural university, but none other than a colleague of Saha. And this P.P. Paul was known as Homi Bhabha of agricultural research, and about him, Borlaug had said, it was during Paul's leadership that the agroeconomic research paralleled equal the best in the world. He was truly the architect of India's Green Revolution. And Swaminathan himself called P.P. Paul as the most eminent biological scientist India has produced. He says what India needs is not agricultural education, but education for agriculture. And this is what the politicians of India are learning the hard way. Okay, so now India becomes independent. And the first act of Bhatnagar as chairman UGC was to announce the increase in salaries of all college and university teachers by 25%. The first, because Radhakrishnan report said the university teacher should be helped to live in comfort if a teacher is to devote energy to teaching, learning, and research. So he implements this by increasing the salaries of teachers by 25%. The first education commission, which is pre-independent, gave nothing to the teachers. It is Bhatnagar who had to come and give the teachers of India the salary that teachers in Lahore were given in the pre-independent India. Today, Punjab government is not giving them the salary that is due to them. So this is the progression of salary scales in India, okay, from 55 onwards. This is what Bhatnagar did, okay, and this is what Kothari did, this is what Yashpal did, and this is what has happened in 2006 when the 6th pay commission got implemented. And for the first time, the joint secretary in the civil service had the same grade pay as the grade pay given to professors at the Indian University. It took 60 years to implement the recommendation made by A.V. Hill in 1944. Okay, so before I end, let me take you through the two quotes. This is a quote from Meghnad Saha. It says, "It is necessary that scientific men in India should try to impress upon the government that states of public bodies the need for encouragement of scientific research for a scientific handling of economic and industrial problems of the country." And he goes on to say, if we wish to remodel our society and renew the spring of our civilization, we must lay the foundation of a strong and progressive national life. We must make the fullest use of power, which is the knowledge of that nature has given us. Then he says, we must mold anew the nature of man in both individual and social aspects, so that a richer, more harmonious race may live in this great and ancient land of ours. We must train the coming generations for the services of the community in scientific research, scientific studies and research. And this is what essentially these knowledge clusters are doing in India. This is what Pune Knowledge Cluster is trying to do by getting things together, get institution, academia, industry, civil society together to work on the agenda of Meghnad Saha, Bhatnagar, Bhabha, Sarabhai, and so on, Satish Dhawan included. So my narration, what can I tell you in support of my narration? There is a book written by Robert Anderson, who wrote a comparison between Saha and Bhabha. That book had come up in 73 when we were PhD students, and TIFR, Ajit would remember that book had come in the TIFR library when we were graduate students. But he has a bigger book which is called Nucleus and the Nation, Scientists, International Networks and Power in India, published in 2009. And he says, Indian scientists passed the war in relative isolation in 1944. When they began to plan nuclear research and went on to tour of atomic research facilities in England, Canada, and United States, revealing curiosity and awareness while visiting some of these facilities, they were questioned by American intelligence officers early in 1945. And I showed you that picture of January 45 with Millikan to uncover how much they really knew. Bomb had not been exploded at that time. But they had the curiosity and they knew what was going on in the rest of the world. So on the eve of India's independence in 47, more than a handful of our scientists understood the potential and risk of nuclear weapons and nuclear power. Okay, this is all history. And he says, Indian scientists, were building international networks. They had already established over many years, long years before the nuclear opportunity presented themselves. Okay, what did they do? They built laboratories, started research, sent people abroad, brought these people from abroad back, involved them in that grand plan of theirs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of Pune Knowledge Cluster and Indian Academy of Sciences, I thank you for a very wonderful and insightful talk about the stalwarts of Indian science, who have contributed so much to what we are what is the scenario right now about Indian science in the country. So thank you so much. We can take a few questions if you permit.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes. So we have a few comments. The first comment that we have is by, we don't know the name, it's RC Galaxy Tab. So additional information about Dr. S.S. Bhatnagar is at BHU, he wrote BHU Madhur Manohar, which is even...
Yeah, I had it as a part of the transcript.
Okay. Yeah, so just a comment. And then there was a request that by Himanshi Sharma, that can you also talk about scenario of Indian astrophysicist? So we can also plan one more lecture of this type.
We just hosted a talk on the astronomy agenda of India by none other than Rajaram Nityananda on our forum, Chandigarh forum. So please invite Rajaram Nityananda. He has the talk ready. It gives you the entire framework of how Indian astronomy and astrophysics scene has evolved over 200 years. Okay. From Kodaikanal, how the conception of Kodaikanal. Who gave the conception of Kodaikanal? It took 100 years for Kodaikanal to start happening. Right, starting from that to LIGO. Invite Rajaram Nityananda. He has the talk ready. A beautiful talk for a period of 1 hour.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. We can take one more question. There is a comment by Kulvinder Pal Singh. So comment on grant of 1 crore in 1944, rupees 1 crore in 1947 would be between rupees 600 something, scaling with gold, and or rupees 1,200 crore, scaling with cost of rice.
See, 3 crore rupees were needed to create an IIT in 1946. I calculated the 3 crore today is something like 900 crores of 2020. So, it's 300 times more. So, if the Bombay plan was 10,000 crores, 10 to the 4. Okay, so it was 300 times if you multiply. That is the kind of money that is needed to just kickstart this depressed economy post-COVID. And that kind of money can be afforded. It's not that we cannot afford that money, but we have to have our priorities right. And unless we increase the agricultural income, there is no income. Large part of the population has to have income which they can spend. And from that only will come the GST and the income tax. Actually, the GST and the tax on petrol. That is what is funding the government at the moment. If you have to have a white economy, this is the only way. You have to give income to people, which you must collect as taxes and then spend on the development of India. This does not require any rocket science. This also does not require political divisions in India. All the political parties will find themselves out of work if these few simple facts are assimilated by the population.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. There are a lot of comments from participants that it was a wonderful.
You can read out.
We learned a lot actually from this. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and giving a talk today. So thanks. We shall close now.
Ajit, anything you want to say?
No, the thing, I've really enjoyed the talk. And there's quite a lot of material which also shows how you cannot sit in a very narrow sphere in science, and you really need to go out into the world and think about it and make lasting contributions. And I really wish that what they did was more generally known. And in fact, I believe that all incoming graduate students and postdocs and young faculty should be given talks about this from time to time to inspire them, because we are becoming increasingly narrow-minded.
So, Ajit, it's not that the scientific, we have differences amongst ourselves. So Saha also had differences with Raman. Saha had developed differences with Bhabha. But in spite of all these differences, this, that, and so on, they never lost sight of the national goal.
Yes.
They encourage each other's students. It's not that it's my student, I'll encourage your student, I will not encourage. All the students of all of them, they work together for a plan which they had conceived together. Plan remains the same. We have an unfinished agenda which these people have put in place pre-independent India.
Yes. Okay. All right then. Thank you very much for this very inspiring talk. And we hope to have more interactions with you in the future.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Bye.
Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you.